Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Friday's webinar from Annika Digital. It's myself and Stanley. I'm the founder and CEO of Annika, and I have got my co-host, Tony Ogby. He's our new head of marketing. Say hi, Tony. And you're up in Manchester today. So is it raining today?
It's so gloomy today, as always. Good morning, everyone. Excited to have everyone on the chat today.
It's very sunny in Leicester today. James, you're also in Leicester, aren't you?
Yep, it's bright, but it's cold. So
yeah, yes, it is. I've got my thick winter jumper on already. So James is going to be talking to us about technical SEO. It's particularly for e-commerce, but it does apply to other people as well. So a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll pass over to Tony to do the polls. So when we go live with the actual presentation, there's 2 arrows top right to maximize the screen. I think you'll find that really useful. We will be sending the video out in a couple of hours. It just takes a little time to process. And you should be able to go and help yourself to the slides in the handout section top right, which is next to the chat. Please do put questions in the chat. We'll do our best to answer. I'm hoping Brad, who is the one that did... Brad's head of Owned and Earned, who did the webinar 2 weeks ago, is on and he can assist me with the chat. But I think that's all from me. So over to you really now, Tony, with the polls, please. Quizzes.
Yes. So we're going to start with the first poll, and it's going to pop up on your screen. So let me know if you can see it. I'm going to maximize that. Can everyone see that?
And you can only click one, can't you? So you can't say all of the above. So just put the one that you spend most of your time on, I guess, would probably be the best thing. I mean, sometimes people just have a specific role to do within SEO, and sometimes they just have to try and do all of it. So, okay, that's interesting.
That's an interesting dive, but it looks like content creation is most of the things that...
Doesn't surprise me though, James. Does it you?
No, I mean, like a lot of the basics in SEO and like content creation and stuff have been really pretty big in 2024. So it doesn't surprise me at all. It's more because it's in some instances maybe harder than it used to be to achieve some of the largest ranking positions, and so I guess a lot more people are focusing on kind of build out and content build out, new pages and stuff. So
I guess a lot of people also think tech SEO is something you do at the beginning and don't touch it again. So they tend to allocate a lot more time to content.
Yeah,
that goes on forever and ever and ever.
But
does. You still got 25% are saying that their SEO efforts are focused on technical SEO. So
awesome.
That's higher than I expected, to be honest. So that's you've got the right audience today.
Good. Well, that's fantastic. So
let's do the next quiz then, please.
Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yep. Do you want to read that one out then, Tony?
Yeah. So what's your current level of expertise in SEO, just to understand whether you're a beginner, whether you understand everything SEO, or like you have some experience, but you're still learning. So it's just to understand where everyone is at, so that James will know what to focus on more on today's presentation.
Okay. I don't think anybody wants to say that they understand everything, because unless you were a mega coder and you it changes so quick. So it's pretty 50-50 then. That's good. Excellent. All right then. So myself and Tony are going to disappear and reappear. How long is your presentation? I did see your slides. Was it 45 minutes, 50 minutes, something like that?
Something, yeah, anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour kind of a thing, I think. So it's like 36 slides or something like that. So
brilliant.
Not too long.
Well, we'll disappear, and everybody, if you just want to, I'll just tell you your slides are showing okay, which they are, and everybody else, you can just grow your slides by expanding them into the corner, and I will speak to you in a bit.
Cool. All right, then. So today we're going to be talking about SEO for e-commerce. So this kind of follows on from Brad's prior SEO e-commerce fundamentals, but we're going to have a bit more of a focus on the technical factors and on the architecture of websites, and particularly e-commerce websites and stuff like that. So first of all, a little bit about me. So I've been in the industry for about 15 years. I started in 2009-ish. So yeah, technical SEO is my bag. It's everything that I really do on a day-to-day basis. I also help out with analytics, Google Tag Manager, stuff like that as well. And I've also been experimenting by creating my own Python scripts and stuff with, basically constructing hundreds or thousands of rich prompts and sending those off to OpenAI's API to basically try and produce content at scale. So that's something I've been trying to do. I'm a search engine land author, so you can see a link in there. And yeah, the link's quite long. If you don't have time to take that down now, obviously you can just fetch the handout and click on that after. And I'm a regular on the SEO Gurus podcast on Spotify. It's also on YouTube as well. I believe that the guys who produce that cut some of the content down to short form. So you might even see me pop up on TikTok as well. So I'm always experimenting with Python and automation, and that's a little bit about me. So moving on. Bit more about Annika. So 17 years of data-driven digital marketing, and the data-driven aspect is something that I particularly pride myself on, with all the data that I collect and all the scripts I create and things like that. And we have a big focus on e-commerce and established brands. So it all starts with the strategy. And, if you attended Brad's prior e-commerce fundamentals webinar, you'll have learned a bit more about that, more the strategic side. And we have a big focus on social and search. So when we talk about search, that's organic search, which is the SEO, and also paid search as well, also known as PPC, Google Ads, etc. And because we kind of encompass both verticals of search, paid and organic, obviously we have a big focus on shopping and e-commerce as well, because there's a lot of crossover there in terms of product feeds that get sent to Google and stuff like that. And also skills, education, learning, etc. as well. We also supply courses through DMI, which is the Digital Marketing Institute. So let's move forward to the agenda. So first of all, we're going to just explore a bit about what e-commerce sites actually are and what makes them different to just your normal run-of-the-mill website. We're going to explore the reasons why e-commerce sites are good for search, and some of their SEO strengths in terms of e-commerce specifically. Then we're going to look at some of the challenges that e-commerce has in terms of SEO and, getting all the products to rank and stuff like that. And we'll deep dive into that. And the main challenge is obviously efficient indexation, because if you're running a really big e-commerce store, you have tens of thousands of products, and also you have loads of faceted navigation filters, and it breaks out into loads of different category URLs. It can be a bit of a struggle. So we're going to look at that in more detail. Then crawl control, handling indexation. And then we're going to talk a bit about JavaScript reliance and why that's not necessarily a great idea. Interestingly, that's actually separate from a website being JS heavy. So if a site is JS heavy and, you kind of have like a single page application or a web application headless that produces your front end, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we can work with that as long as the site isn't JS reliant rather than JS heavy. And we're going to get into a bit of that. And then we'll just give some conclusions and a summary based on that. And we'll also recap just a couple of slides from Brad's presentation as well, just to kind of go over some of that stuff. Okay. So first of all, what makes e-commerce sites different? So the main thing that e-commerce sites do is they allow users to transact online. So there's usually some kind of payment gateway system. Purchases may be physical products, they may not. So, for example, there are websites and platforms like Cameo where you can pay for a video interaction from one of your favorite celebrities or something like that. So products are not always physical, but often they are. And you can see just a little diagram in the top right there where, you kind of have a visitor, they view a product, they add it to their cart, check out, purchase. And then sometimes there's a post-purchase journey as well. If you're weaving all your channels together intelligently, you might have some kind of email that goes out and says, oh, you bought this, here's some related products that might be useful if you already bought that, and you kind of bring users back in again as well. Okay, so wherever commerce happens online, that's e-commerce. If there's a transaction, it's an e-commerce site. Popular platforms include WordPress, obviously, and if you're running e-commerce on WordPress, then you're probably running the build using WooCommerce or BigCommerce or something like that. And obviously, Shopify is massively popular as well. There's other e-commerce platforms as well that you can build on. There's stuff like Squarespace, which is kind of like an up and coming CMS that has all of that kind of stuff built in. And I've said there, many Magento sites are also e-commerce sites. I would go so far as to say most of them are, or almost all of them are, because that's kind of the point of the CMS, is to have all of that e-commerce functionality baked in. So e-commerce sites are good for search. So both paid and organic search, there's PPC and SEO, perform strongly for e-commerce sites. So search as a channel overall, whether that's paid search or SEO, it just works really well when users are already searching for things that you sell. So if you have a large e-commerce site and you're stocking products that, people already know what they are, then the search volume behind those products is larger. And obviously, people are going to kind of connect with those search queries, and they're going to find your website, so long as you're being competitive with your pricing and things like that. And yeah, obviously PPC and SEO are still possible for new and disruptive products. So I don't know, say if you came out with a new piece of software to install on websites, which helps when they get overloaded, and it integrates some kind of queuing system or something like that. I remember that kind of technology was new, like back in sort of like 2012, 2015, and you had people like Qt kind of producing that kind of stuff. And the difficulty that they had is that just no one was searching for it at the time, right? So they were new and disruptive. And so we had to do kind of more lateral content production, and then kind of like use CTA buttons to cross-sell people back to the core product. But, if you've got an e-commerce site, that's not so much of an issue, because in all likelihood, you're going to be retailing products which are a lot more well-known. And because of that, they already have search volume behind them. And so that just automatically makes e-commerce sites good for SEO, good for PPC. So yeah, I put a little diagram in the top right as well, just with some search volumes on, just to kind of show what I meant. And you kind of have like newer, more disruptive stuff to the right, and more established and well-known key phrases to the left. And obviously, key phrases and products that already have search volume, they're more likely to connect with searchers who are querying those things. If you have pages for them, products for them, that's what you want. And it's going to be those conversions that are going to make you money. So e-commerce is kind of like natively good for SEO and PPC and search in general. So that's just something that's good to know. Okay, so let's talk about some of the SEO strengths in terms of e-commerce sites. So first of all, e-commerce sites usually have a really big ranking footprint. And that's usually because you're going to have a separate web page for every individual product that you're listing. And due to that, you're usually going to be able to leverage that footprint in Google's rankings, because each one of those product pages is going to connect with product related keywords. And that gives you kind of like more keywords that you have access to in terms of ranking those on Google. And you might then also have other areas of your site where you produce a blog, and the blog is also, related to some of those products. You're speaking about some of those products, linking those to some of the product URLs that you have on the site. Just this big footprint in terms of having lots of potential pages to rank on Google. Usually that in and of itself will naturally lead to, more Google rankings and more organic search traffic. And obviously it means that you can build out for paid search as well. It means that you can have bigger paid search campaigns where you're bidding on more product related keywords and stuff like that. So that's a big strength in terms of e-commerce sites for SEO specifically. So one thing that you do need to keep in mind, though, is that you still need to be competitive. So if you're ranking a large volume of all different products, popular products that users want to buy, that's really great. And if you're stocking more of those products than the competition, it means that when users browse your category pages, they're larger, they have more products in, and it's kind of better user experience because there's more for the users to browse, more for them to compare internally within your site. But obviously you need to keep in mind your relationships with your suppliers as well, because things like price and stuff like that are very important for ranking on Google. So if you build a giant e-commerce site and you're ranking loads of different products, but you're just not very competitive on price, you don't offer next day delivery, things like that, which people kind of expect now because lots of people shop on like Amazon and places like that. You really need to keep an eye on your USPs, which are your unique selling points. If anyone doesn't know that acronym, I expect most people probably do. So yeah, stocking popular products, really good, but you've got to remain competitive in order to succeed, even for SEO, because obviously all of your products, they're going to be uploaded to Google via product XML feeds for like Google Shopping and stuff. Similar story for PPC. And you're going to have product schema and stuff on your pages. And a lot of that is going to give away to Google what is the exact price of this product. Is there any discount operating, things like that. And Google's going to see all of that stuff, and they'll take that into account when they rank different products within their main search results, within Google search result, within shopping search results as well.
James, before we go on to the next thing, could you just explain two things there for me? Because I think it's really important that the beginners in the room understand what we mean by a product feed, and also schema as well, please, because a lot of people
so essentially in the old days, what would happen is Google would just crawl your site and just find all of the different products on your site, and they'd attempt to isolate using like product IDs or using like HTML IDs and classes on the site, what's the price of this product and stuff. But it's all a bit messy because all different sites are coded in different ways. Different CMSs mark up those critical pieces of information in different ways. So once schema.org came out with product schema, Google were very quick to embrace that. And what that basically means is that when one of your product pages loads up, usually you have like some JavaScript or JSON or something that just quickly fires, and it just pushes into like the network tab or into the data layer. It just pushes, here's some information about this product, this is the price of the product, etc. And there's kind of like a uniform structure for interpreting that information. And the product feeds that you can submit are very much the same. You just submit a feed, like an XML formatted feed to Google of all your products, and it's just structured in a way that, yes, here's the URL for the product, here is the price of the product, if there's any discount going, here's what it is. Stuff like aggregate star ratings for reviews of the product, stuff like that as well. I've just seen Kate has just put CMS question mark. Yep, so that's a good question. So CMS means content management system. So it's basically like the back end of your website where you log in to kind of like create pages and basically manage the content. So WordPress is a CMS, Magento is a CMS, Shopify is a CMS. So basically, in modern day terms, it'd probably be relatively synonymous with the platform that you've built your website on. So there you go. How's that, Anne? Do you think that explains things? So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I turned my mic off.
That's all right. Yeah, no worries. Okay, cool. So we'll move on to the next slide. So we'll begin to explore some of the SEO challenges that you can face in terms of building your e-commerce site, because e-commerce sites, they're very naturally good for SEO, but then there's things like, well, you might have tens or hundreds of thousands of pages. How do you get all of those indexed? So the main issue that you're going to run into is kind of like crawl allowance concerns. And you can see that there's a diagram on the right, which is just a very basic kind of watered down version of like what Google does when it crawls all the pages on your site. So it has a crawl queue, which might come from your XML sitemap or your product feed as well that you might submit, or just previously incomplete crawls that Google has run on your site. they might have queued up some URLs there. They'll dispatch the crawler. Then they'll visit the pages on your site. There'll be a processing segment, which involves rendering the actual page and executing any JavaScript so they can get a proper view of the page. Then the algorithms happen in terms of weighting the relevance of that page for certain queries, which is a box which isn't on there. And then indexation happens, right? So if you have a gigantic website which has tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of products, this little process here has to occur for every individual product page on your site. And you also might have faceted navigation at the category level, where you can say, oh, okay, I'm running an experience days website or something like that. And the users are browsing your experiences. And then on the left-hand sidebar, you have some filters that can be applied. And those filters are what we refer to as faceted navigation, just so you know. And then they say, okay, I want to see 5-star experiences only, driving experiences only. I want to see those only for 2 people experiences rather than 1 person experiences. And then it kind of like builds out this massive long parameter URL. And obviously the mathematical number of combinations between those different filters, that can produce a huge volume of like faceted navigation URL pages on your website. So that can be another issue as well. So yeah, it's really a best compromise between, you're serving pages, hundreds of thousands of pages, and you need to try and ensure that as many of those pages as possible can provide some kind of unique value add for users. So be that some kind of unique content on the page, like product descriptions, aggregate review ratings from your users and stuff like that to build trust. And obviously, as we've said previously in this presentation, also not forgetting to be competitive as well. So provide more detailed information more quickly with better UX than the competition, but also stuff like the prices of your products and the relationships with your suppliers, totally critical for SEO as well. All of that stuff is just really critical for SEO. So as we've discovered, you've got hundreds of thousands of pages. Google is going through this kind of crawl rendering indexation process. Okay, I just see a question there from Simon as well. So what is UX? So UX is user experience. So obviously we're saying that we'd like to include more and more detailed information on product pages and stuff like that. But if that just takes up huge chunks of text and then the user has to scroll down really far for the buy button and stuff like that, that's going to be an issue. So the user experience is important as well. So there you go. So one thing that you're going to have to question quite quickly is which of your pages are actually relevant for search. And in order to determine that, you're going to really want to factor the user intent. And this is where we start to learn that different types of site structure and different types of build out are relevant for those operating within different industries. So, there are lots of people who have e-commerce sites, but maybe you're retailing shirts on a boutique fashion store. And the way that you build out your site for that would be really different to the way that you might build out your site if you were selling screws and washers on a DIY site, right? So that's really important to know. Sites with higher SEO authority tend to be able to index more pages. So sometimes we see situations where people they've produced a huge e-commerce store and they've built out loads of different pages, loads of different products. They've really taken their time with the indexation of like certain combinations of faceted navigation filters and stuff like that as well. But they just don't have the ranking authority to kind of like justify all of those pages and get them all indexed in Google's rankings. So this is just kind of a quick slide to say, yeah, stuff like digital PR and press and links and stuff is still very important. And it's something that you don't really want to forget either. So yeah, going back to factoring your industry and your users' search intent. I put a couple of charts here in terms of search volumes for different keywords. And I did one on like super dry shirts where you can see that, you know, they have basically like a number of different shirts, and those shirts all have individual names, like the Studios shirt, which some people are clearly aware of because it has search volume. But then if you go any deeper than that in terms of, say, oh, let's add things like the dress style, so is it casual, or let's add the material like linen and stuff as well, very quickly you reach a point where there's actually no search volume. And then that's very different to the chart on the right, where if you're operating a DIY store, you know, obviously you have things like flathead screws and Phillips screws, but then you have users who are even searching for the length of the screw, like 10 millimeter, 5 millimeter, or, you know, rather than just searching for screw 10 millimeter, they might even be searching for Phillips screw 10 millimeter. So then you've got the type, the item, and the length as well. And this is where you might take different approaches in terms of how you're listing the products on your site, whether you're having separate product variations or whether you're having kind of consolidated product listings. If you're super dry, then you might say, okay, well, we'll have a consolidated product listing because people are only really searching for kind of the top level iterations of the product. And therefore we'll just have one product page and there'll be drop down boxes where you can change the size of it and stuff like that. But if you're operating a DIY site, then there's still quite a lot of search volumes and information, which suggests that, yeah, you might actually want to have separate product pages for the Phillips 10 millimeter screw compared to the flathead 5 millimeter screw, right? And this is all based upon like the search volumes. So you should really do your keyword research first, and looking at all the search volumes and doing little search experiments, you can kind of quite quickly determine how you might like to build out your site. So speaking about handling indexation, and this is just looking at a similar kind of example again. If you look at the images on the right, you can see that there's kind of like a fashion store where they sell like lumberjack check flannel shirt. And what they've done is, rather than having the products all built out into entirely separate product pages, they just have one product page for that product, and you can select your color, you can select your size. They've got a size guide as well, useful for user experience and stuff like that. But then you look at the lower image, and you can see that, you know, here we have a very, very granular product page. I mean, you've got the branding in there, you've got the material of the product, you've got the length of the product, and also the threading as well. So like the threading width. And so you can see that, just like I was saying, for DIY stores, as it turns out, you have a lot of sites that they just build out every variation as a separate product. And the reason that they do that, the reason they want to do that, is that they know that there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of these really granular search queries. And, you know, one or two of those might only occur per month for that individual query. But when you sort of suck all of those up across all of your different products, then it can be a considerable amount of traffic that you'd wish to intake. Whereas if you're operating a website based on a fashion, you know, selling shirts, fashion, super dry, or that kind of a thing, you know, the search volumes very quickly drop off to nothing in terms of the granularity with the material that's used and stuff like that. And as such, they've said, well, because we're not going to take in much extra search traffic, let's just make the UX easier for the users, and let's just have one product page, and they can kind of customize the product and choose from there. And that makes a lot more sense. So I hope you guys can kind of see from that the way in which you build out your site, even in terms of the product variations, it can be variable depending upon your industry and the kind of research that you perform as well. So this is one example of faceted navigation, which I was talking about earlier. So usually you have these kind of websites where you have a sidebar and there's different filters that you can apply in terms of different combinations. And usually what will happen is, when you pick a few of these, you'll get like a massively long kind of parameter string oriented URL that canonicals back to the main parent product. And so that sub-permutation of the product feed and of the category then cannot be indexed, right? But in this example, on experiencedays.co.uk, you can see that what they've done is they've basically hand-picked some of the faceted navigation filters. So in this case, the category of the experience and the city, And when you combine those specific faceted navigation items together, rather than just producing some generated parameter URL, it actually creates a clean URL, which is indexable for Google. And that means that obviously they might then be able to rank for driving experiences in York, right? Which is quite clever. So the point is that usually this kind of faceted navigation architecture, it's usually going to just result in generated pages that don't rank very well. But you can do development work where you can say, okay, well, for these specific combinations of filters, maybe not all of them, because the mathematical volume of combinations would be ridiculous. But for some certain combinations of filters, you can then build those out into kind of like almost like more static pages, which can rank better on Google, which can canonical tag to themselves, a splash of unique content and stuff like that. And so really that's kind of your aim with faceted navigation. It's to kind of like build out some certain chosen combinations of filters, which should probably be chosen based on keyword research, and to build those out into actual rankable pages. And that's what's going to allow you to rank some of the intermediary terms which sit between the main terms of your website, like experiences, and then individual products. So these are the kind of in-between terms, and that's really how you're going to kind of build out in that area, if that makes sense. So on the other hand, you can have massive amounts of different filters within your faceted navigation that you can apply. And sometimes, you know, if a user applies 7 or 8 different combinations of filters, you end up with ridiculously long URLs, and the mathematical number of combinations between all those different filters is going to essentially chew up all of your crawl allowance, right? So you're definitely going to want to curtail the indexation of faceted navigation and filtered URLs somewhat. And in this example, if you look at the screenshot on the right, and we're looking in the green highlighted box, and you go down a few rows, go down about halfway down that green highlighted box, you can see disallow collections, filter and filter. And in this case, what they've quite cleverly done is they've used wildcards in the robots.txt to say, okay, so if the collection is filtered, then that should still be indexable. But if more than one filter is applied, so if you see filter and then you see filter again in the parameter string, then in that instance, you should block that page from indexing, because it's just becoming too granular and it's wasting too much crawl allowance. So just don't forget that essentially you have robots.txt at your disposal. You do want to try and build out some of the faceted navigation combinations where, you know, there's search volume behind it and into indexable pages, but that's probably not going to be the case for every combination of faceted navigation and filtering on your site. So you're still going to want to put some limitations in place to kind of curtail that. And I've just seen a question from Isabel as well. So how do you find the higher indexing search term? Or maybe what you meant by that is, I assume, like the higher volume search term, or the search term which is more searched by users. So there's a few tools that you can use to do that. If you're running paid search, then you have access to the keyword planner within Google Ads, and you can perform keyword research in there. You can type in different keywords, wildcard expressions, and it will come back with just like a load of keywords, and it will tell you what the search volumes are. The only issue with the keyword planner is that it will give you sometimes ranged search volumes if you're not spending enough with Google Ads. So instead of saying, oh, the average number of searches per month for this keyword is 10, it might say the average number of searches is 10 to 100. And obviously, because it gives you quite a broad range, that then makes the data a lot less useful. And a question that you might then have is, well, to get the real data, how much do I have to spend with Google Ads to get it to serve me the proper keyword data? I don't actually know. I've been trying to chase that information down for a really long time, but I can't seem to get anyone at Google to confirm exactly what people have to be spending. It might even be dynamic based on your type of site and industry and stuff as well. So if that doesn't fill you with confidence, there's also tools like Ahrefs, and there's tools like SEMrush as well, where they have inbuilt keyword discovery tools, and you can pay a smaller amount of money to those tools, and you can still get search volume data out of those. They are paid tools, but it's probably not going to cost as much as you would have to spend with Google Ads to get the clean data. So I would recommend looking into SEMrush and Ahrefs. So if you're just a single individual user, SEMrush is probably cheaper. If you're a larger user and you've kind of got a team and different people in your organization that you want to work with, then in that instance, because of their pricing structures, Ahrefs is probably going to be cheaper in that instance. So now we're going to talk a little bit about beware being too JavaScript reliant. Again, by this, I don't necessarily mean JavaScript heavy, because lots of sites are now built headless with their front end being like a web application or a single page application. And that's not always bad. That's not always bad. But sometimes when a web application creates the front end, it doesn't inject enough stuff into the source code. And then in that case, rather than just being JavaScript heavy, it becomes JavaScript reliant. And it's JavaScript reliance that we want to avoid.
I think you're going to have to explain this again in a little bit more basic terms. So people won't know what headless means. They might not really understand, and you might have to show them an example of what you mean by JavaScript, where the pages sort of elements of the page are triggered by the action of JavaScript. Just because you've got too many people in the room that won't know what you've just said, understand what you've just said.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So essentially, like back in the day, all websites were sort of coded basically in like HTML, CSS, PHP, etc. And so the advantage there was that obviously any content on the website, all of the links and stuff, they were all in the source code of each web page, which is the coding of the web page before scripts have executed, right?
And it's like a static page. It's not going to change. Nothing. No
less dynamic.
To run. It's almost like you've got an image with links in it, and you can go from one place, and the code behind it makes it look the way it is and make it acts the way it is. But there's nothing complicated in there. There's nothing sexy in there. There's no nice features like accordions or things that open up or move around.
And also those sites tended to be, in some instances, slower as well, right? Rather than nowadays, often developers will code front ends in frameworks like Vue, and then Vue will basically like transform all of their simple coding into a front end. So what it means is that the front end of the website is more execution based. So rather than just Google crawling a page and just seeing a document and going, oh yeah, here's the links, here's the content. Yep, I'm reading the source code. I know what's going on. Instead of that happening, Google visits a page and then a web application executes, and it kind of like produces and generates everything. And sometimes that can be a bit confusing for Google when there's not enough information in the source code. But there's new technologies that have kind of come out to kind of supplement the adoption of web applications and single page applications and stuff. So stuff like Nuxt or NUXT, that will kind of sit on top of Vue, and it will go, okay, you've had your single page application that's kind of like generated a whole website, but I'm now going to do some server-side rendering and put some of that information.
I think you're actually making it now more complicated, because you're introducing quite a lot of new terminology. So I think if you carry on, I think if everybody just sort of understands that JavaScript is code that usually often sits off of the page, so therefore it can speed up the site, but it allows you to do some of the more interesting features and functions on the page.
Yeah, it essentially can just make websites a lot more dynamic, and the functionality can become more dynamic. So e-commerce sites are often large sites should beware in terms of producing overly JavaScript reliant builds. Large sites which are almost 100% generated via JavaScript, and that's where if you try to browse the site and you disable JavaScript entirely, and then you just see like a blank page and there's literally nothing there, those types of sites often struggle when there's not enough information that's like placed back into the source code. And this is true even in light of Google's recent comments. So recently Google have come out and said, yeah, we now render all pages that we come across. Okay. But looking at their documentation, Google are saying stuff like speed still matters. Now, in general, a web page application or single page application website will speed up a lot of the functionality of the website from the back end to the front end. However, all of that JavaScript is then executed in sequence in the user's web browser. So it can also actually create new bottlenecks as well. So interestingly, as well as speeding a site up, if you overdo it with JavaScript and you go over the top, because you get client-side bottlenecks, it can then actually start defeating itself and slowing the website down again. So, and then Google say, while it's okay to use JavaScript, try not to overdo it. Simpler websites are often easier for both Google and visitors to understand. Okay. So we also just need to keep in mind that we just don't know the exact parameters under which Google made that statement when they said, oh, you know, we now crawl all JavaScript and we render all pages on the web. So does that mean that, you know, Google will go to a page and at that point in time, they'll execute the JavaScript, or are they just going to log the source code information and pass the JavaScript execution into an entirely separate queue? And if they do that, are they still going to be missing some information in the short term? And is that still going to be a problem for you if you have a large product turnover on your e-commerce site? Maybe they'll put the execution of a JavaScript page for a product into a queue, and then you remove that product and replace it with a different one. And by the time they come back and render the page, they don't get to render it and they don't have all the information. So the point is that, you know, even with that statement from Google, we still have to be careful in terms of being overly JavaScript reliant as it was. So information for some of the more technical people in the audience. So you can still use JavaScript heavy or single page application front ends if they are built on the right technology stacks. So for example, I described earlier how Vue on its own will basically act as a web application and it can build a whole headless front end, but then it doesn't really inject anything back into the source code for Google to read. And that makes things a bit difficult in terms of for Google crawling the site, because it won't find all the internal links and stuff like that. However, if you utilize a framework like Nuxt, which can stack on top of Vue, then obviously you can do some server-side or edge-side rendering whereby essentially the single page application or the web application will create all the front end using JavaScript, and then Nuxt will basically do some server-side rendering to put some stuff back in the source code as well. So there's frameworks where you can kind of work both of these different types of technology together. And it does, if you're thinking, oh, I've got like a headless single page or web application front end, and it's now seeming like that's going to be difficult for SEO and it's really not going to work for SEO, that's not necessarily true, because there's usually other frameworks which handle your server-side rendering, edge-side rendering, which you can stack on top as well, which will kind of give some of that rich information back for Google. Okay. And if you look in the top right there, that's just a little basic example in terms of how Nuxt usually handles things. So essentially how Nuxt will handle things is, you know, user will request a page, the single page application will generate the whole front end, but it won't have much stuff in the source code. And then Nuxt will basically add some of that information back into the source code and make the page a bit more static. But obviously then that's even a problem, because the reason you use the single page application is to make the website very dynamic. So it will then go through a process called rehydration, where it will put some of the JavaScript back into the static version of the page. And that's kind of like the best combination of all of these different technologies working together. And particularly these days, it's really critical to be aware of this, because if a lot of you are planning to build e-commerce sites, some of you might end up building sites on WordPress or Magento. And it's very common now for WordPress and Magento sites to operate headless web application front ends, which don't have a lot in the source code for Google. But if you're at least aware that there are other technologies that can be integrated to kind of add some of that information back in, you can get all the benefits of running a web application for your front end for your website, like the speed and the fact it's so much easier for your development team to kind of code using Vue rather than doing everything from scratch. But you can also retain some of the searchability and fundamental architecture that Google needs for the crawling of those websites as well. So it's just something that's really important to be aware of. So now things are going to get easier and less technical again, which I'm sure a lot of you will be pleased about. We're just going to go over some reminder slides from the Fundamentals of E-commerce webinar, which Brad presented. So there's just a few of his slides, which I thought were really good and really insightful. And I just kind of wanted to put a few of them in kind of for repetition, especially if you've attended the previous webinar, just because they're just really important things to factor when you're thinking about SEO and e-commerce in general in 2024. So AI overview, as we know, I mean, it's gonna shake up search in general, but it's really gonna shake up search for e-commerce. And if you look at the image on the right there, you can see that Google are already running experiments in terms of how they might integrate products and product listings within the AI overview rather than just the general search results. So yeah, the overview, depending upon what question you ask it, the AI overview just aims to respond to you with information and you know, like the facts that you need, rather than just a broad list of websites and pages to click on. But this means that in the e-commerce space, it's going to end up giving recommendations for specific products. And you can already see a Google experiment running there on the right-hand side, which is doing that kind of a thing.
Before you go on, can you just explain where the AI overviews, where it's getting its information from compared with the top search results? Because obviously a lot of people haven't been involved with, they haven't seen our chat GPT or our previous, or this presentation. So they won't actually know where AI overview data comes from.
Yeah, so it comes from a number of different sources. Because stuff like Google Gemini and Google's AI overview, they all began their lives as LLMs, which is like a large language model, which basically meant that they had like a huge file, which was basically like a massive language model with loads of information in, and they just basically queried that. And you know, that information came from all different kinds of places. So like corpuses of language, probably like pages from the web and stuff, or academic articles, all kinds of things stuffed into that language model. And then they would essentially query that and use that to formulate their response. Now, Google's AI still has a language model, and that informs, I guess, more like the kind of language that it uses as it responds in terms of trying to sound like a human being. But in addition to that, obviously Google's AI, like the AI overview and Gemini as well, they also have access to information from the web, because obviously Google has a huge index and cache of all different pages on the web. So Google's AI is very capable in terms of querying that information. So some of the information comes from a predefined, pre-produced data model. Some of the information also comes from the open web as well. Is that a good explanation?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And I guess if you aren't aware that Google's, because a lot of people can't see this in the UK yet, the results, if you went and used something like ChatGPT, you might get something similar. So, yeah. Although I haven't seen any results like this with the images and things like they're doing here.
No, this is
the first time I've seen product images in AI overviews, to be honest. So I've learned something new this morning as well. So
that's probably an example from the USA, I would say.
Yeah, I think so.
I have seen Google AI overview in the UK now, so because they're rolling out to some people in certain accounts and stuff first, just to test it.
Yeah, no, I mean, sorry, I agree. I mean, not everybody in the UK has got AI overviews at the moment.
That's all, yeah.
We both have, but I've not seen. I think you're right. I think the product testing and the ads in AI overviews is more a USA feature than a UK feature at the moment.
At the moment, yeah. I mean, a lot of experiments tend to start in the USA and then move
Absolutely.
over here later, don't they? So just kind of how it works. But yeah, just keep in mind, it's, you know, AI is, you know, people say it's on the horizon. I'd say it's like here, and it's in its integration phase. So it's something that we all need to be supremely
Yeah, Brad's
aware of.
written in the notes actually that it was a demo from themselves about how they're going to introduce the product listings into the AI overviews, which is really interesting, because I think a lot of the concern is if you're doing normal SEO, your SEO results will disappear down the page. And we've been talking for, well, probably 2 years about the fact that as AI results become dominant, they're bound to put paid in there because they need to make the money. So SEO becomes sort of relegated further and further down the page.
Yeah, or this just becomes the new SEO is what I would say.
Yeah,
you know, like, because it you know, instead of it being all about, you know, how can I optimize my web pages to appear in a list of results, it's just going to be more about like, how can I influence an AI and enter the data model so that that AI feels confident in terms of recommending my products instead of someone else. So it's just an evolution of how.
So Isabel's asked an interesting question: how long until this would appear in the UK?
It's a preview, isn't it? So
yeah, the speed of development is so fast. The reason why they've pulled back a bit was because of all the stupid things that was in the AI results, like, you know, glue your pizza or glue your topping on your pizza and eat.
Oh God, I remember that one.
And eat urine, all sorts of things like that. So I think they panicked and limited the exposure to everybody.
Yeah.
The people that have signed up for the original trials tend to be the ones that still have got access. So if you were just a member of the general public, you might not see it. But if you ask sort of question type things and go and experiment, then you will definitely find examples.
Yeah. So like, essentially, it's really interesting because obviously the AI that I think is actually superior at the moment in terms of answering questions and stuff is ChatGPT, which is the one that's produced by OpenAI, not Google's one, right?
I agree.
And I felt that way for a long time. But what's really interesting is that for a long time, in terms of language models, machine learning, and AI, it was thought that if you just give AI more data, it performs more strongly and it performs more better and gives better results and better information. And so Google believed they were in this very privileged position with their search engine and all these cached pages and massive index of all the content of the web. But what actually happened is when they very first started connecting all of that information to their AI, some of the results were actually really bad. And that's because all of the information on the web isn't curated, right?
And some of it's really bad.
And some of it's really bad. So what they're dealing with, their AI may in the end up being superior to OpenAI's, but at the moment they're grappling with tremendous amounts of data pollution, and it shows in terms of.
I love that data pollution.
Data pollution, yeah,
and toxic data too.
Yeah, bad data, just bad data, bad information. Because, you know, so if you've ever looked at Google's results and you've ever typed in a query and a spammy page is ranked at the top and you thought, oh, Google thinks that page is good and has good information, but I actually don't think it's a good page. Well, imagine how that same situation is impacting its AI, which at this point is like a child that's trying to learn, right? So it's being fed lots of good information. It's being fed lots of bad information as well. So, and that's why Google then said, okay, we've got to rein back the number of queries that the AI overview is shown for to just very specific queries that have very definitive answers, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, so organic shopping. So organic shopping listings are becoming more prominent in Google's results, meaning that they appear more often, they take up more screen real estate, they're more visual. So obviously optimizing your shopping feeds for organic results for SEO, and also this really important for PPC as well, is really, really relevant right now, more relevant than it's ever been before because of the kind of increased prominence of these results within Google's rankings.
So just having a bit more of a conversation about that, then we create our shopping feed to go into Merchant Center for us to use in Google Ads.
Mm-hmm.
But that is an evolution of something that was available years and years ago. It was originally called Google Base, and then it was called Frugal, because you used to be able to feed your product listings into Google and it show it for free.
Yeah.
And then what it did was it then monetized that so that it would make money out of it, which is why we get all the shopping ads and performance max ads. But now, interestingly, it's almost gone a little bit the other way. And I think this is because of all the antitrusts and competition regulations around the world. It's sort of trying to be a little bit more fairer and show more free results. And so you notice now that as you scroll down, you've got your sort of standard text results, and then you'll get a big chunk of free product listings, which have come from effectively the same source, but they're not charging for them.
Yeah, so if you go all the way back to like 2009, 2010, you could log into Google Merchant Center, you could submit a feed of all of your products for free, even if you weren't using Google Ads, and you could get in Google shopping results. Google then changed their mind and they were like, well, this feed is actually only for Google Ads users. And so you could only then get into the shopping results, get your products in there if you're running Google Ads. But a couple of things happened there. One thing that happened is not enough people, I think, used it. So their shopping results actually ended up not being that great because most pages or most e-commerce retailers didn't use that facility. So the product listings got really thin. And then they then came back the other way and they were like, okay, we're going to now allow you again to kind of submit free product feeds, not just if you're using Google Ads as well. So yeah, you're right. It's kind of come full circle in that regard. So let's have a look. So question from Iskra. So I noticed yesterday Merchant Center and they have generated a found online store feed with a bunch of out of stock items they were showing in free shopping. Would you recommend to hide those? I mean, if they're like, that really depends kind of like upon your cycle of product fulfillment, right? So if they're only like temporarily out of stock for like a few days or like a week or something, then I'd probably leave them in. But I might alter the like the UX of the website so that on your product pages, if it's serving a product which is out of stock, it knows that when the user visits that page, that product's out of stock. And then maybe it comes up with some kind of carousel saying, sorry, this product is out of stock, but these related products are in stock and maybe you'd like to browse to those.
There's another issue there though as well, because your feed shouldn't be producing including items that are out of stock. So you need to go back a step and find out why your feed has got that in there. The reason for that is if you are using your feed also for Google Ads, those ads can be easily and very quickly disapproved if you have lots of out of stock items. So yeah, you just need to make sure that the information in the feed is correct as well. So
yeah, this is
I'm just a bit conscious of time because I'm not sure how many more slides have you
got. We are very near the end now, a few minutes at most.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So we're near the end.
We're talking too much, and that's my fault.
No, it's my fault as well. I like to get some of that action. So, okay. So talking about topic clusters, and this is a very important point that Brad raised. So you can't rely on optimizing a single page to start ranking. So quite often, you might have a category page, but embed some FAQs on that page about grass seed. Have guides how to plant the grass seed, what's the best type of grass seed for different gardens. Have your blog posts as well, and kind of interlink all of that together into like an internal network of resources that supports the category. If you have a smaller site where you're not listing that many different products, maybe you could even do this at the product level as well. If you have tens of thousands of products, then obviously there's no way you're going to be able to adopt this structure at the product level, but at the category level, perfectly possible. So I think we've already been over faceted navigation enough. So I'm actually going to skip those pages because I think I've been through that pretty thoroughly. So we'll just.
I was going to, before we go to conclusion, there was one thing I'm not sure if you mentioned right at the beginning, is the fact that ChatGPT is launching its own search engine, because we were talking about AI overviews and how powerful we thought ChatGPT was.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how and if Google can respond to that, and how disruptive it is for Google as well. So
cool.
But yeah, conclusions. So we've talked about leveraging the SEO strengths of e-commerce sites, their massive ranking footprints. We've spoken about addressing some of the challenges like the crawl efficiency, various ways you may wish to build out your site or not in terms of product variations, faceted navigation, etc. We've talked about adopting technology. So if you're JavaScript reliant rather than JavaScript heavy, you may need to adopt additional frameworks to get some of that stuff back into the source code to kind of make your site easier to crawl for Google. So yeah, frameworks like Nuxt, which stacks on top of Vue, very, very beneficial. And then, yeah, preparing for 2024, the advent of AI in search. We've briefly explored some of those technological advances. And we've also covered some techniques to index filtered product listings as well. So that is it. So that's it. So my email's on this page. Obviously, if you have any queries, just remember it's james.allen@anakin.co.uk rather than just james at. And yeah, I guess we can take questions now, I suppose. So.
Yeah, I think there's been quite a few questions. Tony, is there anything we've missed as we've gone through?
The only questions that I think that I went ahead to respond to was when someone was asking about the UX, what UX was. But for the most part, I think we've covered most of the questions.
I've just put up the Anakin review. So if any of you found this really useful this morning, if you'd like to give James a review and mention James's name, that would be amazing. I appreciate that from everybody. I think for me, you have to sort of guide yourself into this slowly. Technical SEO is not as easy as writing content, because a lot of the people that you're having to impact are the web developers. And of course, they understand the code and everything else and how the site is built. So I do think that when you are starting to move from maybe a content SEO role into a technical SEO role, you have got a lot more to learn. I think it's quite a geeky subject from that perspective, particularly when you start talking about JavaScript and that sort of stuff. Also, the other thing that I don't know whether you mentioned is that there's some of the nuances of different CMS systems, like how things like Magento will suddenly show every single variant as a single page, or you'll get lots of different parameters in the URL for all the different countries and things like that. So I'm guessing there's even another level of even a further level of complexity when you start looking about optimizing for specific website platforms.
Yeah, that's certainly true, and you also find that actually none of them do it perfectly, and I think that there's actually a considerable volume of errors in terms of how all of the different platforms handle indexation and stuff. It's just that they all have different indexation errors and stuff. But yeah, Magento has benefits and detriments. I mean, like you say, it does everything in a very granular and generated way. But you're perfectly capable of indexing pages on Magento. Obviously, it's a bit slicker in terms of back-end to front-end data transfer. Whereas if you're using something like WordPress and WooCommerce, it's not like the database is not quite as efficient and stuff like that. So
we're getting some interesting questions about Merchant Center. So unless you're doing performance ads and Max and shopping ads, you're probably not aware of Merchant Center. Unless you've always fed in the free results. So somebody's quite correctly mentioned that there's a new version of Merchant Center called Merchant Center Next. I'm not quite sure whether it's in beta in the UK. I don't know if there's any of the ad team, or Tony, if you could possibly message Pete or Holly to find out. I think Holly's on holiday today, but maybe Pete or Martin to find out whether Merchant Center Next is already launched in the UK. I know that a lot of things that Google are doing are trying to basically cut agencies out and make it so simple that you don't have to do things like provide a product feed. So if they are testing it, it wouldn't surprise me that they're not scraping the site themselves to try and find the content in the same way that they do things like that with Performance Max and products like that. So that would not surprise me at all, that it's generating its own feed. Because it's not launched yet, I haven't done a lot of research for myself yet. So apologies that I normally know a little bit about everything. And because it's brand new, I haven't gone into it in too much detail yet. So apologies that I don't know the answer to that. But we'll just check with the team to see if anybody else can answer that question. With regard to making it free or not, if you use Merchant Center and you'll load your products in, it's very likely that it will appear in the organic shopping results. But if you are going to actually, if you want to use the ads, you actually have to go into Google Ads, set up a shopping campaign or a Performance Max, which is an AI-driven shopping campaign, and then you link your feed. And it's by having your feed linked that you actually can create those shopping ads. So, and then you have to allocate a budget. So you will know if you've got paid ads because you would have actually had to set it up. And there was a Performance Max webinar a couple of months ago by Pete. So if any of you are interested in how to set it up, but because the ads dominate the whole of the top, it's in a lot of cases, it's the main driver for e-commerce traffic. SEO, of course, has been pushed down by things like the AI overviews, the shopping ad results, the map results. And so SEO gets driven further and further down, which is why it's so important that if you are going to invest in SEO for an e-commerce website or any website, that you get your technical SEO sorted first, because without that, you're unlikely to be found. I think that's the only other question. Is there anything?
I'm just looking through to see.
I've just seen a question.
We've got a few learners that are on our DMI course. So if you aren't on the DMI course, just to explain what that is, we run something called Annika Academy, where at the moment, every month, we've got sort of 50 to 100 learners joining us, and they will also join the webinars. It's a 4-month course. We've got lots of places if anybody's interested for certain regions. So please message us or message me if you're interested, and I can, I'll put a link in here actually. So the link to go and sign up for this, if you're in certain counties, is annika.co.uk, then /free-training. And if you are on the boot camp and you want to submit your attendance and your timesheet, there is a form for that, and we'll get it sent over to you, or you'll be told about it in the next course. Mark will send that out. Brilliant. Is there any more questions? I think that's everything, isn't it? I think
there's a few people who just said, you know, that there's a few people in the audience who were beginners, and they've quite rightly said that for them it was, you know, it was pretty full on and pretty technical. And Simon has asked, would Brad's introduction be more suitable for newbies to understand? Yes, absolutely it would. So,
yeah, which is why we run it first. So if you've joined recently and you didn't catch that one, I would definitely go back and watch the video and watch Brad's first, then watch James, because that will make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. I do understand that some of you may find it a little bit difficult. Technical SEO is one of the more difficult things, and if you haven't even done the SEO course yet, so this is the sort of stuff that you might come back to later. We can't really, because we're running more than one course at a time for the people that are watching the course, we can't really get the timing right for everybody, because we've got people at different stages. So that's why we always recommend that you go back and look at the videos. Okay, well, Tony, what's next week?
Next week is going to be confirmed. It's the topic, and then I can put that on the website and then send out all the big markers.
Okay, you don't have the subject yet.
Mm-mm.
Okay, all right then. Well, hopefully we'll see you all next week. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.